Here at the Canadian Club, we have always been a forum for public figures, thought leaders, and decision makers to share their ideas and inform the most relevant and compelling conversations of our time.
We are dedicated to encouraging debate on the issues that matter to this city, this province, and this country.
The Canadian Club is one of the most important podiums anywhere in the world that a Canadian can speak to, tell Canadians what it is that they think, develop those thoughts. And so I want to thank you for that very, very much.
Please join me in thanking our esteemed panelists today.
Through our programs and events, including our youth and young leaders programs, our diversity partnerships, our joint events, and our media and social media opportunities, we offer you access to dynamic political, social, and business figures from abroad and right here at home.
The platform from which the eloquence of Canada has flowed all of that time, whether it be business, education, politics, sports, arts, and culture. If someone wants to say something to Canadians about this country and about the future of this country, this is the venue you choose.
Well, good afternoon again, everyone. I'm really glad that you enjoyed your lunch. The energy in the room has been fantastic, and I know our guests have been circulating as well. So hopefully you had a chance to meet them in person, and if not, you'll certainly have a chance to connect on questions during our session as well. My name is Joseph Lowe, President of Canadian Club Toronto, and I'm delighted to be your host today. A special welcome to those of you who are joining us online, all 500 plus of you, thanks to the AV services of Valkenburg Communications and LiveMeeting.ca. You're going to make our conversation even richer. I'd like to thank Scotiabank and the Scotiabank Women Initiative for its generous support and sponsorship of today's event as well. Thanks also to our season sponsor, Canadian Bankers Association, for its ongoing support through our 125th season of operation. I'd also like to acknowledge Canada's Forest Trust, whose commitment to acting on climate change is making all the difference. Our partnership with the Trust has reduced the carbon footprint of our entire season of club events. Finally, we are also very grateful to Futurpreneur for partnering to make our event possible. Thank you so much. And I know there are Futurpreneurs here in the room as well, so if you are a Futurpreneur, if you're involved in the organization, please take a moment to stand and be acknowledged. You truly represent the future of prosperity and innovation in Canada, and we acknowledge you. Now, as always, Canadian Club Toronto is highly interactive, and given our guests today, I'm sure there will be no short supply of questions. So you will find Q&A cards, old-fashioned style, at your tables. Fill those out. We'll get them up to Karen for moderation. And if you're joining us online, hit the submit a question button. As always, you'll find that on the right-hand side of your screen, and we'll get your questions that way as well. And now it's my honor to formally introduce to you our guests. Joanna Griffiths is founder and president of Knix and KT by Knix, direct-to-consumer intimate apparel brands. Since the company was launched 10 years ago, she's built Knix into one of the fastest-growing global intimate apparel brands. Joanna holds multiple patents and has been cited in hundreds, literally hundreds of media articles and publications such as Forbes, Fast Company, and the New York Times. Global health and hygiene brand Essity recently acquired 80% of Knix, with the company founder holding the balance. The sale is the largest publicly disclosed private sale of a D2C brand by a female founder in Canada. Jordanian-born Noura Sakkijha is the third generation in a family of jewelers and co-founder and CEO of Mejuri. While she loved fine jewelry, she initially chose to pursue a different path and a different passion. She studied industrial engineering at the University of Jordan before immigrating to Canada and obtaining her MBA from Toronto Metropolitan University. 8 years ago, she decided to return to her first love and as well to her family roots. Mejuri is the category-defining jewelry brand built on the foundational principles of empowerment, inclusivity, and innovation. The Mejuri Empowerment Fund is a clear example of these principles in direct action. The fund has provided scholarships for BIPOC women and non-binary people in Canada and the United States. Moderating the discussion is Karen Greve Young, CEO of Futurpreneur, the national nonprofit whose proven financing and mentorship model has supported the success of more than 16,500 young entrepreneurs since its founding in 1996. She previously worked at Toronto's Mars Discovery District and in San Francisco, New York, and London at organizations such as Bain & Company, Gap Inc., and UK's Institute of Cancer Research. Joanna, Noura, Karen, it is my distinct privilege to turn the Canadian Club podium over to you. It is in very, very good hands.
Perfect. Excellent. As we get going and sit down, I am laughing at myself. I was so thrilled that Joanna, our board member, stood with her Futurpreneur affiliation that I forgot to stand.
And I was like, you're a little bit involved.
This is so incredible, honestly, having you both here to share your stories. And when we were speaking, getting ready, I was struck by so many similarities between these amazing founders. And I'm so grateful. I want to start by actually thanking everyone who's here in the room and thanking, my understanding is there are more than 500 registrants for the online audience for this event, which is amazing, which I know includes a number of entrepreneurs and our Futurpreneur team members from across the country. So that's super exciting. So thank you both for being here. Such an honor. And both of you were involved with Futurpreneur and got some early stage support in the early days of founding Mejuri and founding Knix, which is incredible. You each raised significant Series B funding rounds while pregnant with twin girls. Yes. I mean, talk about serious similarities. And we'll get back to that, because we'll get back to that. And you each created these extraordinary brands that are focused on empowering women to be who they want to be, to buy and wear what makes them feel extraordinary. So that's just really incredible. So with all of those similarities, and also you've grown your businesses, and Joe spoke to that, but honestly, your extraordinary success as founders and the 1.5 million customers, 540 million Canadian dollar round, or a valuation. These are such milestones. These are big numbers. I'd also like to talk about how that's all started. You have a lot of entrepreneurs in this audience and in the virtual audience. Let's hear about your founding stories, because there are things that are a little bit different. And maybe you could start, Noura. Sure. You're not from Toronto.
No, I was born and raised in Jordan, like Joe said, and I'm a third generation in my family to work in jewelry. So I've had so much love for the product. But I think being an insider to something teaches you, or you essentially start to know what you don't like, which is just as important as what you like. And I think, growing up, just observing the fine jewelry industry, whether it is a mom and pop shop or a smaller brand like my family's, or whether be it a very big brand, what's in common is that we're all taught that fine jewelry is very exclusive, high price point. And the part that I didn't really love is typically marketed for men to buy for women, which I found to be super traditional. So I took a detour, studied engineering, I moved to Canada, I worked in consulting. And then, once I started to make my own disposable income and I wanted to buy jewelry for myself, there was nothing out there. But there was a lot of brands that are popping up as direct-to-consumer, really changing the narrative across all categories. So we decided to create Mejuri with a very simple premise, which is women buying jewelry for themselves, or as we say, buy yourself the damn diamond. And there's something extremely empowering about this, and this is sort of the root of the business. We want women to buy jewelry for themselves, to appreciate themselves, to celebrate what matters to them, and not necessarily just Valentine's and the holidays.
Nice, brilliant. Thanks. And you are originally from Toronto, but you weren't here when you got the idea for Knix. Tell us about your founding journey.
Sure, so I'm not a third generation underwear bearer. I knew so little about the product when I started, but I started Knix because I came up with an idea to create great-looking underwear that had leak-proof properties, also known as period underwear or leak-proof underwear as we call it at Knix, and was really inspired when I discovered how many women leak during pregnancy, during postpartum, when they laugh, they sneeze, they cough, they exercise, and just how there were no products on the market that were really designed for this really big thing that affects 1 in 3 people, and when you take into account periods, it's even more. So I went to school, I did an MBA, and in that kind of setting, had the freedom to think about this idea, to use every single opportunity, every project to work on the idea. I joke that I talked about one thing pretty much exclusively while doing my MBA, and it was leaks. And I was, the hit of every party. So much so that Nikki, who's my best friend, who also is the CMO at Mejuri, because we have so much in common, when we ended up winning the business venture competition, the entire auditorium shouted out our tagline at the time, which was "Don't pad the problem, nix it." And yeah, that was the idea, and what compelled me to kind of take the leap of faith was really in researching and talking to people, just understanding what an emotional impact experiencing leaks can have on people. And it can affect your self-esteem, it can affect your participation in sports, your participation in the workplace, your relationships, all of these different things. And that just didn't feel right. And at the time, there was, a lot of brands in the intimate apparel space that were projecting a very singular view of what a woman should look like, how they should behave, and it was very much marketed for men.
Yeah.
And so similarly, saw this opportunity, let's create a brand that talks to their customers for who they are, that creates products for real life, and that honors them by showcasing just how fantastic they are. And so that was kind of the start.
Which is brilliant. And that's exactly what's happening now with both companies. And yet, you're founders. You've been in this for a decade. Probably wasn't all easy or straightforward. There may have been a couple of challenges.
Maybe 2 days here.
Along the way. And so I guess I think we'd all love to hear, especially the founders and the audience, what were some of the challenges you faced? And more so, at what point did you know this was going to succeed? That you'd really, that this was going to be a huge success? And either of you, same for both of you. We'd love to hear from both of you.
Sure, I can kick it off. I mean, the challenges don't stop, but I think just the way that you frame them, you just get more experience with expecting them, maybe. But I'll talk about the early stage. The early stage is probably one of the hardest phases because you're essentially trying to prove something, trying to raise capital on an idea. And obviously, for me in particular, when I was raising my seed funding, everybody was talking about AI, and I'm talking about jewelry, so you can imagine how easy the conversation was. But it got me to go back and really sharpen my pencils in terms of how do I talk to business people about the size of the opportunity, how do I sort of contextualize it for them. So for me, the early stage was access to funding was a lot harder than when I look at my peers in the US, it was a lot easier. But honestly, everything has a benefit. For me, it just helped us become smarter in terms of tracking the right things, being closer to the customers, really saying no to vanity metrics, really focusing on building value. But while doing that, so for example, for me personally, I have always been wired to sort of work super hard, achieve something, work hard and achieve something, and then I was working hard and nothing was happening. And so it took a lot of, it was the first time in my life where I felt like mentally I am being very challenged. And it took me a while to get out of that sort of, I had like, very difficult time in the beginning. And the save for me was actually surrounding myself with other entrepreneurs who are amazing and doing great things and failing and then trying again. That was literally the save. I can go on and on about challenges, but as the company continues to grow, the challenges become different.
Yeah, interesting. And that's surrounding that community of entrepreneurs. People who know what this uncertainty and madness.
Yeah, and that's when you ask me, what would you say to an entrepreneur? I would say embracing failure, part of the process, and not making it about you, because there's no way it's going to be a straight line.
Right.
You're going to fail, but looking at it as a data point is something that's going to make you better, because I came from a culture where failure is not very, it's kind of like shameful. I came here, also we have a little bit of that culture over here, but when I went to the US, I'm like, everybody's talking about where they failed and how they failed, and they're embracing it. And so now bringing that back even to our team and saying, we got to try things, we've got to fail fast, learn, and go back, and we should embrace it.
Yeah, that's so important for all of us. I know it's something that you have
Learn to
learn
embrace
to embrace
failure.
and persevere. And then also just sort of those early, same thing, those early challenges and kind of some of the inflection points along the way of Knix's journey.
Yeah, I think Noura did such a great job of describing it. You have different challenges at every part of the way.
Yeah.
So the first the initial hard thing for me was, how do I make this product that doesn't exist? Mm-hmm. How do I convince manufacturers to take a leap of faith and to create this thing when they don't quite understand what I'm talking about, and somewhere I have the original prototypes for Knix, and they were horrific. Like, it was not pretty, like huge bloomers with just not nice. And so at first it was like just the physical challenges of making this product. Then I think it became the challenges of like convincing people to be bought into your idea, and that, how do you finance the business? And I think there's like an interesting transition that happens as a founder, where in the beginning, you have to be so resilient. Like, you don't have a lot of resources, you do so much on your own, you power through, you fight through. And with that can often come kind of a victim mentality, where you sort of get stuck in your own struggle. You know, it's so hard, no one understands it but you're on your own, how could you possibly get it? My team doesn't care as much as I do. It's like, of course they don't. It's not their, like, let's get real here. No one's gonna care as much as you. Yeah. And so I think finding the tools to get out of that and to come onto the other side is so important, because there's gonna be step changes along the way. And I remember, like, when I look back at the things that used to break me, and when we're talking, it's like sobbing on the floor, like literally break you. You feel like you're not gonna be able to get back up. Honestly, now those things happen, and I'm like, brush it off and keep going. And so it's the resiliency is really important. And the most recent challenges now is, how do you build a team, and how do you let go of that control when the initial control is what got you there? And that's like a whole other path on the journey. And I think Noura and I are both really fortunate. We're first-time founders, first-time CEOs, that get to continue to lead these companies as they go through so many different chapters.
And I love something you always say, I'm a work in progress, which I completely, like, just recognizing that you don't know everything, and that you've got to, A, so surround yourself with the right people, but B, you have to go and learn things. Right. You can't stop.
Right. It's the most humbling job in the world when it's going well and when it's going poorly. When it's going poorly, you have to convince yourself that you were right in your audacity to do something. Right. And that's when it's going poorly. Like, you could just second guess all the time. Did I make a mistake? Why did I do this? And then when it's going well, every day you're leading a company that was bigger than the day before. And every day you feel like you're in over your head. And every day you're being humbled by the things that you don't know. Yeah. And so it's just hard.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So speaking of hard, so everyone's feeling really inspired and excited about launching their business now. And speaking about hard, launching a company takes resources. It takes people resources, which you spoke to, but it takes financial resources. And you have each had extraordinary success raising money, Series D round, huge private equity investment. But you started somewhere. That's not where you started. You didn't start with those rounds. What was fundraising like for you in the early days? And then maybe we'll get into the later days as well. In the early days, who were your early funders?
So early funders for me were initially friends and family. And then I went through the whole chapter of like going to Silicon Valley and pitching lots of VC funds. And that was, 2013, 2014, 2015, mainly male partners. I mean, the stories, it was a nightmare, to be honest. I was trying to tell people about this problem that they had no idea about, and every meeting kind of went the same. These venture capitalists, they have like 15 meetings a day.
Yes.
So they literally walk in, they're like, oh, what company is this?
And you're saying the same thing.
And exactly. Yeah. They're like, what company is this? And they would, at some point, clue in that I was trying to talk to them about underwear that you bleed and pee in. And the horror. Like, literally the horror. So every meeting was the same. It was like, wait. 1 second. They would go drag whatever woman they could find to come into the meeting. And then we would go into the dog and pony show of, hey, Karen, does this happen to you? Do you pee a little when you laugh? And the people, like these poor people, and then they wouldn't invest, go figure. And so that was kind of like the next chapter of things.
Right, which was early venture.
Yeah. And also, I know Noura will speak to this too. Like, I think Canada is an incredible place to build a company and brand. I'm so grateful that we've done it. But in the early days, people did not want to back businesses out of Canada.
Yeah, I second that. So I think for me, pre-seed, it was actually easy. First of all, Futurpreneur was fantastic in this. You get the loan, it's non-dilutive, and that's perfect because you don't know what the heck you're doing when you first start, and you don't know valuation, you don't know anything, and so that was perfect. I got support from, I was at the DMZ, and we got a grant from, from Slate, so we got a lot of grants, Ontario Centre of Excellence. So in the beginning, I felt like I'm getting bits and pieces, which is also hard because you can't necessarily chase a big idea. But then when it came time for seed, I remember actually, Joanna's probably a few weeks ahead of me because when I go to the VCs here, they would tell me, oh, we met with Joanna a few weeks ago, and none of them would fund us. And so
we should have gone together.
Yeah.
We're like, it's worth the flight for the board meeting.
Yeah,
you can do them both at once, you know?
And so I chose to be part of Business Accelerator. So I started in Montreal with Founder Fuel.
Oh, right.
And Founder Fuel were the first sort of venture check-in. And then BDC, and then at that point I recognized, so that was all pre-seed, and I recognized it's a little bit hard to get funding, but let me focus on the business. And by the time it came to seed funding, it was really, really hard. I raised over $80 million. The first $1 million was the hardest and the biggest accomplishment, which is crazy when you look at the scale. But it was at that point where we had gone outside of Canada. Our biggest investors are in the US and the UK, with Real Ventures being one of the Canadian investors.
See, and that's fascinating. So your early funding, your early support, Canada.
Yeah.
Your friends and family were probably largely here.
Yeah.
We're here.
Futurepreneur's here. I know I'm such a bad board member. I also got a Futurepreneur loan. They gave me money when no one else would. First check-in.
And it's so important that so much has happened since then.
Yes.
But so early stage, there are, you have to work for it. You have to scramble, but there are Canadian resources. We're one of them.
Yes.
And then late stage, your largest and lead investors are not in Canada. So do we have to worry about that?
I think so. We over-index on primarily tech, I think, in Canada. And I think there's a lot of, obviously, value in building brands.
Yeah.
And so I think, it's nice to diversify.
I had 2 decks when I was raising money, a Canadian deck and an American deck. And in the American deck, I would be asking for like $3 million. And in the Canadian deck, I would be asking for $1 million. And the Americans would say, you only need $3 million?
Yeah.
Like, have you lost it? And then the Canadians would say, you're gonna raise $1 million? That's so much money. Have you lost it? And so I just had 2 decks, American, Canadian, because the markets were so different.
Very different.
And I think the applauding failure a little bit comes with the cushion of having the funding to get back. You know what I mean? And so it's a different mindset. It's a different, it's really interesting. That was a long time ago.
Right.
It was, 2015.
Yeah.
But it's real.
It is real. And I don't know that if it got any better, to be honest with you, but I think it's something that's definitely would be. Both of our companies are employing a lot of people. Both of our companies are mission-driven. There's a lot of impact from being a brand. And we obviously use technology.
Well, and just thinking about the amount of money that you've each raised, the rounds you've had, and I think if you ask people, what more people would know is that you were pregnant with twin girls while you were raising money. Who knows a male founder who was pregnant with twin girls while they were raising money? I'm sure a lot of them were. Well, actually, your co-founder is your husband, so he was.
Yeah,
that's true. But people don't ask them. They all asked and challenged you, and you were 6 months?
I was towards the end, 6-7 months. Very obviously with twins, it was very visible.
And you were within 3 days. Is that right?
Yes, that's right. I closed the round on the Friday and delivered on the Monday morning.
Yeah, that's pretty good, huh? But it is pretty amazing.
I mean, is that good or is that just cutting it close? I don't know. I'm going to go with Noura here. But a little buffer is not bad.
But having those resources, I mean, I think about how many, to Noura's point, how many people in Canada have incredible jobs. How many women are empowered by your products and owning and feeling, frankly, liberated to do what they want to do by your products?
Yeah.
It's a shame that from an investment perspective, Canada hasn't been involved with these success stories.
I mean, I have had Canadian
good
investors, just not at the institutional level, I guess I would say.
Okay,
yeah,
good.
yeah. Like angel investors and, I mean, candidly, people that had added more value than any other investor that I've had on the cap table. Like, who were actually would come to the office, would meet with me, would mentor me. Like, there's no better investor, in my opinion, than someone who's built a business before.
Yeah.
Because they actually get what it takes. Mm-hmm. Interesting thing about fundraising, and I would love Noura's opinion on this, I think that I had a slightly easier time because it was during COVID and it was over Zoom and no one actually saw how pregnant I was.
Right.
I'm not sure, honestly, if it would have worked. Well, first of all, I wouldn't have been able to travel because I wouldn't have stepped
Oh,
out.
right.
Yeah.
So it would have, Zoom became an equalizer in that case.
Interesting.
So I did it over Zoom, but you reminded me of something. So Canadian, we do have real ventures, and I would also credit women. We have to have more women in venture, because if I would say who started the ball rolling for us, it's a woman, Janet Bannister. Yeah. And so that's obviously the entire Real Ventures is a fantastic team, but Janet was an integral part in getting the ball rolling for us. And then during our Series B, I couldn't travel, so I did it over Zoom. And because I remember NEA, the partner who was working with me was a new mom. And so she got everybody on Zoom. She's like, this is the first time we're doing this, but I'm going to make it happen. And I think there's this, anyways, it gives me goosebumps to just realize here on stage the impact of having women investors on actually funding female entrepreneurs.
Yeah.
And not necessarily question whether you're going to do a good job because you have kids, because I obviously was asked some of these questions.
Exactly.
In an indirect way.
I think it's so easily when you're raising money to take it personally that people say no to you. And you collect hundreds of no's to get to the yes, And one of the things, and I don't know if Noura experienced this, the timing of when we started, there were a lot of Canadian venture funds that were in e-commerce, direct-to-consumer businesses that weren't doing that well. And so they felt like they were already all in. They were we've got too many eggs in this basket. We're not really sure about the thesis. You're every company is different.
Yeah.
But, that was kind of, there's a timing thing, and you see this a lot in that industry. They get super hot on a business area where everyone's excited about it, and then they get really turned off by it where no one wants to go near it, and then they get excited about an exit happens and they're excited about it again. And so the timing is kind of everything.
It's like D2C was so hot in 2021 and it goes down, then goes up and it goes down completely.
Yeah.
You got to pick the right time.
You do. Timing is so much of it.
Oh, it's interesting. There happens to be a question from the audience just about that. How do you navigate the balance between new product innovation and product line expansion versus staying authentic to your core customer base? And is this easier in direct-to-consumer as you're more agile or nimble, or is it higher risk?
I only know direct-to-consumer, and I would generally say yes, because you talk to your customers directly. I think you have more sort of different types of products. We have only jewelry, so the innovation is more of design. So maybe Joanna can shed more light, but I would, for us, I'll tell you where we sort of did something different. So pre-pandemic, we were primarily under $500 in terms of our assortment. And so during the pandemic, which is counterintuitive, we launched our 500 plus type of products, and we launched it with a smaller part of our audience to just understand, how are they going to perceive this? And I think having that connection and very quick feedback is probably what helped us double down on it. But I would assume with the same thing with innovation.
Yeah, that customer connection.
Yeah.
Yeah, I think we're so lucky to live in an era where your customers tell you all day, every day what they want. And so we get a lot of feedback from customers on what they want us to do.
A lot.
A lot. So much. And it's not always kind. But it's helpful.
Yeah.
And I think that that's key when I think about products we've launched or things that haven't quite gone right. It's because it wasn't actually what the customers were asking us to do. And there's this desire to kind of overcomplicate things or to feel like you need consumer insights people to come in, and it's like, no, they are telling you all day, every day in the comments what they want from you.
Yeah.
And so if you just read the comments. This is what I constantly say. The answers are in the comments. They'll tell you what color they want, what style they want, what new product they want you to make. It's all there. And sometimes I see brands make missteps. I'll never forget being at a big conference and seeing another lingerie brand saying, our community has spoken, and they're telling us what they want next, and we're revealing it here. And I was really keen to hear what it was going to be. They're like, it's a fragrance line. And I was like, there is no way that your customers are going to you and saying, please make a fragrance line. It's like you want to make a fragrance line, and you're forcing this here. Your customers want
better.
Exactly, of what you have, of the core. But one advice I would give is have a minimal viable product. Don't wait. So even if you're not direct to consumer, going with something that is 80% and seeking customers' feedback is better than waiting until it's perfect, and then you continue to iterate. That's like my...
Right. And that's for all founders.
Anything is don't wait until it's perfect.
Right. That's great advice. I think often people ask, what do we need to do to prepare? And statistically, anecdotally, women over-prepare.
Yeah, and remember that when you're starting, it's really... you don't have a lot of customers, and that's obviously nerve-wracking, but at the same time, the impact is a lot smaller. So you actually have the superpower to go and gather feedback without having high risk.
Right, interesting. Mm-hmm. Yeah, and you have to be welcome to the feedback. You have to welcome it.
Oh, yeah.
Yes.
Yeah.
You have to
it's hard sometimes. I always joke, the returns team in our company tell me I'm not allowed to work in the returns department because I'm like, what is wrong with this? It's perfect. Why are they returning it? It's beautiful.
They say they don't like it? How do they not like it?
Give me their number. Let me talk to them.
They're like, please don't. You're like, no, it'll be fine.
Noura, you're fired.
Not be fine.
Is there a department that you're not allowed to work in at Knix?
Many. I've learned to... I think one of the things, especially when you become really focused on consumer feedback, it's taking a step back and looking at the trends in aggregate. So I always tell our team that. They're like, we're getting this feedback about this product. And it's like, okay, how many people? Like, a lot. And you're like, what's a lot? And you're like, okay, 10 people said this out of 50,000 people that bought it, out of, this is, what do you listen to? What do you not? How do you prioritize? That, I think, becomes...
Completely.
Because you can effectively, if you're trying to please everyone, you end up
pleasing no one.
You kind of go nowhere. That's it. Yeah.
There's a great question actually about that whole allocation. This person attributed themselves to the question, so I'll ask it and share who shared it. They have a hello for you, Joe. So you raised the $1 million. Now, how do you best decide how to allocate that money so that you get to the point where you no longer how to raise? Question coming from Danny Kagan, co-founder of MediaEvents.ca. Hi, Joe.
It's interesting. I remember right after we launched getting an offer for $1 million from a Canadian fund, actually. And my mentor at the time said, Joanna, what are you going to do with this money? And I was like, what do you mean, what am I going to do? I'm going to spend it. And she was like, on what? And I was like, I don't have an answer for that. And so I ended up not raising the money because I didn't have a solid plan for it. The thing that no one tells you about raising money is the second you raise it, the clock starts on how do you turn that 1 million into 3 million, 5 million, 10 million. And if you don't have a solid plan, don't take the money, because the people who are giving it to you have the expectation that you have a plan and you're going to turn 1 into 10, and you're going to turn 10 into 100. And if you can't do that, then you end up in this really difficult sort of triangle where you're not meeting their expectations, you're not returning enough on the investment, you then can't go raise more capital, and that's kind of like a vicious trap to come into. So I think that when I think about raising money, it's often, what's the plan? What's going to go the furthest? How am I going to take this 1 and turn it into 2 and turn the 2 into 4, and just iterating on that. And what you need with the one is so different from what you need later.
Yeah.
And there's so many different ways to finance your business too. Like if your biggest blocker is inventory, don't raise equity financing for that. Go
That's why,
like
100%.
to your point about start with non-dilutive.
Yeah.
Yes,
Yeah,
yes.
because typically so in the seed round, you have a little bit more, I guess, leeway with how you spend the money, but the thought process is always on growth. Equity is always for growth. Yeah, and inventory and what have you. Try to shrink the timelines as much as possible. Try to figure out inventory strategies that make sense because inventory is the hardest. And then that should be with debt. But in the early stages, sometimes you may have to allocate dollars from equity into inventory. But I would focus on making sure that the replenishment cycles or production cycles are as tight as possible.
Interesting. Yeah. That makes a lot of sense.
And when you start to get KPIs, you will not be able to raise without these KPIs. So you get a grace period in the beginning, then you get KPIs and you've got to essentially be able to
meet those key performance indicators.
And you'll know exactly where do I put pressure and be able to talk to that essentially.
Yeah. So agree with that statement. Ideally, the pre-launch money is the easiest money you ever raise because it's just you selling your idea, the conviction you have, the passion you have, and what you're going to bring to the table. The second you have customers, you have KPIs, you have a report card, then it becomes about the metrics.
Yeah.
And the numbers have to speak for themselves. And the reality is once you get into Series A financing, Series B, a single partner looks at 2,000 pitches a year and maybe they make one. The odds are against you. It's why you have to get 500 no's to get the yes, because that's just statistically it, you know?
Yeah.
Such an important lesson, because I think sometimes people think the early is the hardest. And they look at you and they might think, oh, it must be easy for them at this stage. It stays hard.
It's hard because you don't have credibility yet. So it's hard in different ways. But the way that you spend the dollars, nobody's watching with scrutiny. But I think if your metrics are good, it gets easier, I would say. But how you spend it gets very precise.
Interesting.
Yeah, at least that's my experience. I had just come from Jordan. I'm like, I don't know anybody. I went to the accelerator, so I have no contacts. And so that potentially why my initial raise was hard, but started with Founder Fuel, with DMZ Founder Fuel, and then I went to 500 startups to build a network, and that was the perhaps why.
And to be honest, that's why, like what we do at Futurpreneur, it's
so
like
important.
it's like the before all of that, so that you have the funding when you're doing.
And you have some metrics, so you can,
Yeah, exactly. We do ask for metrics, but we don't necessarily hold you accountable as long as you're repaying your loan and doing well, which is great. So I'm going to switch gears, actually, we've talked a lot about fundraising, but I suspect that's resonant for the founders in the room. To each of you, you've known each other a long time.
Yes.
Yeah. So what do you most admire about each other as extraordinary leaders?
I think so. Nicole is Joanna's best friend, and Nicole works with me. She also thinks I'm the best CEO. I'm joking.
And twin mom.
But I always tell her all of the things I admire. I can summarize it with Joanna is a force, literally. And I remember like when one particular example in COVID, I'm like freaking out, sweating about how do I what the heck do I do? We have stores, we're going to close this. And she's going through the same thing. But on top of that, you did the sourcing of the masks. And I thought that was just, she's somebody who's driving impact, and she's somebody who's like a force to just make change. And I really admire that.
Amazing. It was a lot of masks, too.
There's a lot of masks. Got deep into the mask
So funny.
situation.
So you're a force. What would you say?
I would say the same thing about Noura. I mean, and there's, I have so much respect for Mejuri and the brand that she's built and the way that she uses the platform to change how people feel about themselves. I am so bought into this mission. I have bought that diamond for my damn self. I've opened it. I've literally said the tagline. I've put it on. And it's so powerful. And I feel that Noura leads with such grace and poise.
Thank you.
And we've watched each other grow up, truly.
Yes.
I think we first met in 2015.
Isn't that amazing?
And we've gone through these different chapters together. And it's just, there's something so cool about seeing your peer grow and evolve and lead and create and build. And it's something really special to see.
I was hosted at Joanna's company to do a fireside chat, and when I walked in and saw how big the company is, I got chills because it's like you remember when you were literally just like 3 people working on a product and you just like recognize how far we've come. But one thing that I also truly appreciate, which is something very important, I would say, is we've had real conversations. And sometimes in entrepreneurship, a lot of like fake it till you make it, which I think is very wrong. And I think that really was super impactful for me.
Yeah.
Our conversations haven't changed that much either, which is the interesting thing. Yeah, like I feel like it's like, hey, how's Instagram going for you? You know, how's this going? Like, have you tried this? Have you tried that? We're still trying to figure it out.
100%.
So the tip swap being the like, you know, that is still so there, which is funny.
Which is amazing.
Like you think that things are going to change so much, and they don't. Yeah.
Well, and what's important is that you are each who you were then, and now with all of this experience, and you really, as you say, you've grown your companies together, but you still have that real grounded relationship as the scale of your challenges and opportunities has evolved. What are you working on? I mean, you're each extraordinary CEOs. So many, you know, I'll say thousands, but I think I probably mean millions of people admire your leadership, and yet you're constantly trying to improve and do better by your companies. What are you working on?
Myself. A lot.
Yeah.
Because as you build a team and you lead, you learn that you have to evolve and step up to the plate, and that takes an entirely different skill set. So the joke of like work in progress, I live that every day.
100%.
I really, really feel that. And beyond that, building an incredible company, brand, and legacy that will exist for generations. Like I think that once you get past the point of, is this going to fail or am I going to make it? Then you start getting into this cool era where you're like, what do I want? What do we want this brand to be known for? What's the impact?
Yes.
Like I love the foundation and fund that you've created and how you're, you know, those are like, that's the next exciting thing.
Yeah.
And how do you stay the same?
Yeah, the new version of the same.
Yeah, the new version of the same.
An evolved version for sure.
Yeah.
For me, from I guess a personal development standpoint, I would say something that you probably would have never heard me say before is slowing down, but here's the caveat. It's really just to be more reflective. I think where you fall into a trap of being super reactive, things are coming at you all the time and you're always just reacting. And I think just recognizing that I need to slow down a little bit, process, reflect to be able to really accelerate afterwards. And that's something that's challenging for me as somebody who, you know, is always on the go. I don't have, you know, I'm working on my patience, these things that I'm sure many people are working on similar things, but this is what I'm personally working on. And I think we've come to a realization too within the business that we want to continue to raise the bar in terms of the team, the performance of the business, how we work well together, because we recognize we went from fully working together to remote and then now hybrid. And it's like, how do you drive high performance now with like, meaning like we're all working towards the same mission, super results oriented. So these are sort of some of the things. And similarly, like the fund is something that I'm excited about. This year we launched Year of Action as part of also our impact on women's access to healthcare. And I'm also very, very excited about our retail footprint.
Oh, that's so exciting. I mean, the future is so bright for both of these companies. It's kind of almost like chilling. It's so exciting. Final word, final question. What, if you had to sort of give one word of advice for the young, aspiring founders in the room, particularly the women founders, and I should say in the virtual room, this is an incredible audience. What would you say to people who are either just starting out or are at one of those really hard moments on the journey? You know, just one quick comment. You know, it's obviously a really easy question.
There's a lot, that's the thing. Do you want to go first?
No, it's sure. I'll buy some time.
Buy some time, exactly. Let me think about this.
I think the first thing I would say is that's incredibly normal, and I wish more people would talk about the struggle and the hard times and the failures, because it's so easy to just want to share a highlight reel. Right. And actually, when you go back and you reflect the highlights, the real growth comes out of those hard times. So that would be the first thing. And the second would be invest in yourself today, whether that is getting a coach or learning how to journal or meditate, like whatever it is, this is a game of resiliency, and it matters so much that you stay in the positive mindset.
Right.
It matters for your business, it matters for your team, it matters for your family and the people that are supporting you. This can be really, really, really hard for not just you, but for everyone around you. And so I wish I had learned that earlier. I wish I knew that the only person who would have to keep up with Knix's growth was me, and that I had put effort into that, because it's so easy to put everything else first.
Yeah.
And yeah.
Yeah.
All right, so
I love
put
that.
yourself first
Yeah, 'cause-
in an important way.
I agree.
Noura.
I think I would say surround yourself with amazing people, and that's sort of applicable in different ways. In the early stages, it's literally talk to everybody, learn from people, apply it, and when you grow, hire the best people and check with yourself that I know what excellent looks like. And I think that's, in theory, we all think, oh, I know what excellent looks like, but sometimes you have to like go and search for it and then figure out what does excellent looks like, and then reflect.
Nice. I think you both are really showing us every day what excellence looks like. And it's really great to have the reminders of what you need to do to make that happen, whether it's slowing down or whether it's actually, focusing on yourself, even though there are 5 deliverables that you have people asking you to be working on, and building from small, starting off, right? Founding from the very beginning, bloomers, leak-proof bloomers.
Hideous leak-proof.
To these really extraordinary global brands with Canadian roots. Thank you both so very much. We are all going to keep watching, and we're inspired. We might do some shopping. We're really inspired and excited about your next chapters. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you so much.
Joanna and Noura, we are in utter awe of the positivity and the energy you all exuded today. I don't think there's not a single person in here or probably out there who's not smiling right now and reflecting. So we're truly indebted to you for having joined us at the Canadian Club. I had 3 takeaways of my own that I got from your remarks. Number 1, that your humility in the face of both adversity and success. It's easy to be humble at certain times. It's not necessarily easy to be humble all the time. And I think that has been kind of an ingredient that both of you share, obviously. And I think it makes its way to your teams and ultimately your products as well, which kind of links into my kind of next comment, which is I'm not a customer yet, but...
Buy it for your damn self.
Exactly. Thanks you for saying it for me. But you know what? I think it's these 3 words stuck out to me, again, adjectives for you both. Your authenticity, your grace, and your humor inspire the followership that you have developed. And I can get behind that. Absolutely. I will buy it for myself. And you know what? I think finally the world needs more women investors working alongside women and founders and futurepreneurs like yourself. So again, let's thank our esteemed guests today. And Karen, to you, thank you to you for steering such an engaging and enlightening conversation today. And thanks as well to your masterful leadership of Futurpreneur, really creating a platform for leaders like Joe and like Noura and others as well. Thank you so much, and we appreciated your partnership today. Members and guests, before we close, let me tell you about a number of our upcoming events. Next Wednesday, April 26th, we'll have a panel of thought leaders at our podium to address CEO activism, so in many ways a continuation of today. You won't want to miss that. On Tuesday, May 2nd, we'll host the Honorable Ranj Pillai, who will be visiting us. He is the Premier of the Yukon. And on Monday, May 8th, we'll host a conversation with Communitech's Chris Albinson and Noura Sakkijha from Brim Financial to discuss, again, further build on today, what's next for the Canadian tech ecosystem. Visit us at canadianclub.org, where you'll find out more both about these events, be able to purchase your tickets, and learn about membership options as well. Finally, a final round of thanks to our event sponsors of today, Scotiabank and Scotiabank Women Initiative. We couldn't have been here without you. Members and guests, thank you for joining us today. It has been a pleasure. Take care and look forward to seeing you again very, very soon.